Hello, patrons. I am in Salzburg. I've been here for 3 days now, so I just finished practicing today for the first time in Salzburg, actually, because I didn't have access to pianos. Also, you might hear some traffic noises because I have my windows opened currently, and so you might hear a variety of noises in the background. Anyway, thank you for sticking around on my Patreon. I know there hasn't been a lot of things going on Patreon, so we have lost some family members. but I really appreciate all of your support, especially when I was arranging my trip here. I had more expenses than I would normally because of COVID. I needed to book a lot more days, and also I don't know when I am going to be able to return to the US because of a travel ban. And last time I was able to go back to the US because of the national exemption, but then they changed something recently and the rules keep changing. I love the birds here, by the way. I love it. Um, so I honestly don't know how many days I have to stay in a hotel here somewhere in Europe, but yeah, just felt like I wanted to say thank you for your support because, as you know, your support is how I can survive being a rising pianist. Because after this performance, my next one is, I think, in end of August. So obviously, I cannot earn my entire living from these concerts that are so sporadic, but things might pick up the more we grow and the more things get back to normal. So, in the meantime, thank you for being my safety net, and so I can afford to be staying inside and not be stranded out there. So, anyway, long ramble. This will be a very short Q&A because there weren't that many questions. This is a monthly Q&A that I do exclusively on Patreon where I ramble and do not edit, so you get all the exclusive details plus some probably unnecessary ramble, but I thought I would just keep it super down to earth, I guess, and raw with my patrons. So, yeah. The first two were not questions, they were just very kind comments. So, thank you, Classical Piano Rarities and Kevin Pete. I find it interesting that somehow people say that I help them get over negative times when I actually personally have been going through lots of sporadic negative stuff. And so we're actually not that different, probably, but somehow our energies intertwine in between different moods and different moments of life. So it's interesting, but thank you. And third one, actually, Celeste, I haven't seen her in a while on my comments, so thank you. It's actually honestly not that impressive what I do with 24 hours in a day. I mean, I failed my fundraiser that I did for Data with Classical grant. We only reached 6.5k out of 10, and that is because I did not do a live stream. But that was because I was working on a lot of little, well, they're not little, but details and logistics of really big projects, and everything is kind of on hold. So I was working on those things, and I just could not do a live stream on YouTube because it also conflicts with what I'm trying to do, which is make an album and for people to go buy the album and listen to a proper real recording rather than just going to my YouTube all the time. So there were a lot of factors why I couldn't do, but I guess it eventually boiled down to me not having enough time, but it's also like I spend a lot of time in bed not really doing anything productive, so that's to say I think people have a much higher value of how I spent my time than I actually am in real life sometimes. There's a bug climbing up at the window. Hello, little guy. Please make out the window so you don't get trapped inside here. Hey, buddy. No, it's not gonna move. Okay. First question, George Leon. You mentioned in one of your Q&As that you'd like to collaborate with a fashion brand someday. Which fashion brand would you like to collaborate with the most? Celine. I like their simple aesthetics and very classy. I think they've done the most kind of sponsorships and collaborations with celebrities that I know of. Aside from that, I don't know who else would be open to a collaboration. I mean, I also love Chloe, but these are brands that I just watch from afar because I would not be able to afford their clothing, so I guess those two brands stick out. I think Chloe did something with artists at some point during the pandemic, I forget. But Nutella. How has your philosophical studies impacted your playing? I'm just wondering if it's changed the way you approach a new piece or changed the way you thought about an old piece or maybe some other thing I'm not thinking of. I hope your more recent studies are going well. I imagine the changes are very gradual, very observant over long periods of time, but I could be completely wrong on that too. What are your thoughts? I think the world's education system, from a very generalized perspective, is that you go to school for a certain subject, you specialize it, and you choose that path because you want to make a living by doing that. And there needs to be a direct application that is tangible. So if you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school, you get your certificates and you get your degrees and your experience of, I don't know what it is to be a doctor, but I also think a lot of people treat food the same way, like you eat eggs for protein and you eat fish for omega-3. A lot of these common everyday life stuff, there's a very strong habit of direct application. If something isn't immediately seen, then it is questionable. So for philosophy, it changed the way that I was and am as a person, in that I, on the upside, can think in multiple perspectives. On the downside, I argue against myself way too much, because that is what I was trained to do. I was realizing this recently, that I hold on to one particular issue very, very long, and that's because I think in multiple ways of arguing why that was wrong, or why this is not great, or is that this is not going well or something. I just go back and forth in the stupid dialectic, which sometimes is useful for getting certain things, but sometimes it's also just shut up. My brain needs to stop arguing against myself on something that is really trivial and not important. Like, if something is done, it's done. Stop thinking about it. And I think part of that, I would guess, came from the training of writing papers in philosophy classes. I think it trained empathy because it forces you to think in a perspective that you don't agree with. And I think in modern times you are very much encouraged to pick a side, and you have to like or dislike something, and you can't be in between, because then you will be called a relativist. And yeah, it's always a debate of how much leeway you give yourself and how strong do you want to be in your philosophy or standpoints. But I think trained empathy. Yeah, I think philosophy trained my empathy and thinking bigger sometimes. I don't know. It's both. I think it's more about how it shaped the person that I am, and it's not possible for me to say that I got 3 grams of this for music in order to play this particular piece. It's not something like that. I think I've always had an unexplainable affinity towards German philosophy and romanticism. So just around that period of mid 1700s, late 1700s to end of 1800s or something like that, I like reading those a lot. So it of course corresponds to Schumann and the Romantic era, but of course I also like playing Bach and Scarlatti, but I can't say that I have read anything from that time, really. Long-winded answer. Hope that explains some of the confusion. I get asked this question a lot, so I completely understand why you asked this. Richard Jennings. That I have to reassemble my personal team. I don't have a personal team. Because I can barely afford to support myself in a way. Like, I have your support, and that's pretty much it. Mark, you are wishing me a great trip. Thank you. Oh, I didn't see this comment before. I will take a look at some of the things you mentioned. I didn't know about Cafe Winkler. I did take a long stroll a few times along the South River. I did see some castles. Not sure what exactly I saw, because I just see castles, I don't know which is which, but yeah, I really like the Mirabelle Gardens. Not so sure about the horse carriage situation, because in New York City it's kind of frowned upon that these even exist because of animal rights. I don't know how they're treated here, so I feel kind of on the fence when I see them. I almost got ran over by two horse carriages earlier today because they were really close behind me and I didn't see them, and I was like, not the usual kind of New York traffic moment. CW, you are in Salzburg for the first time, right? Yes. Can you please tell us then a thing or two you came across so far about this place that you find surprising that you did not expect before? I can tell you one very trivial thing. I did not know about the mask situation. In the US, you can wear any mask, and in New York, you don't have to. Well, actually, it's the same in New York City as it is here in Salzburg, but in the US, you can wear any type of mask. But here, you have to wear a specific white, well, they can be different colors, but it's a specific FFP2 or P2, FFP2 mask. And I did not know that that was a mandate. On the train, I only saw it after I booked the ticket. And I was noticing that I was the only one with a blue mask, which is a regular surgical mask. And then I realized that it's actually a state mandate, that in order to go indoors, you have to wear that. That's probably not so interesting for those who are Europeans. And maybe this already is a law in your city as well, but that I did not know. So I was very much, obviously, the tourist. Another thing that I noticed. Unexpected. I don't know if I have anything unexpected. I don't know if I had any expectations, to be honest, so I can't say that I had anything that surprised me. If I think of it later in a Q&A, I'll let you know, but I don't think so. Everything has been pretty much as expected, or just I don't have any expectations. I don't know if it's surprising, but there's just too many faces of Mozart everywhere, tagged on things that have nothing to do with Mozart, which I felt kind of strange. And I don't know how many of those people who are buying the Mozart stuff or selling the Mozart stuff actually know or listen to Mozart's music. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. It's a bit strange. But then the Mozart house and the birthplace actually don't even have Mozart's face anywhere in a sculpture or any form. So I actually passed by both places a few times without realizing it. So I guess that would be the second thing. Hirokatsu. I guess I'd like your thoughts on discovering new music to play or listen to. I have a mosquito bite. How do you do that? Do you have recommendations? They come at random times when I find inspirations to play a certain piece or learn a certain piece. Sometimes maybe I just want to learn something new by a certain composer because I want to train for something in particular. So the Liszt Mazeppa has helped me because I knew I needed something technical with a lot of octaves and jumps. Like today, I didn't practice for 2 days, and when I first ran through the Brahms concerto, I missed a lot of the octave jumps, so I needed to recalibrate my hand and my fingers by playing through the Mazeppa. And then not long after, I was able to land all the notes, and I broke a string for the first time in about 6 years. So yeah, I think it might even be longer than 6 years since I've broken a string. Sometimes it helps to find maybe albums by artists that you like, musicians that you like, pianists that you like, and just listen through. Sometimes if I play an album in the background while I'm not even doing anything that was related to music, I sometimes get latched onto certain snippets of the music that I hear, and then I will decide to learn that piece. What's DC? No question. Thank you for your good wishes for Salzburg. Christine Claver Schmidt. Have you had the opportunity in the past to play Schumann's piano concerto? Thank you for wishing me the best in Salzburg. I did play Schumann's concerto at Zwickau at the Schumann competition in the final rounds. It was a lot of fun because there was a special atmosphere to play in the ballroom, and everything melted really well somehow. Yeah. That was in 2017? 2016? 2016? 2016? 2017? 2016? 2016. Candy Troy, why did you choose to stay in the United States instead of other countries to develop your music career? By the way, I hope that you're already not stressed out with haters attack. Take care. Thank you. It depends on which moment I see negative comments, but it really helps to have everyone supporting me and showing support. So, thank you. I did not choose to be in the US because I was 7 years old when that decision was made. I had the opportunity between UK and US, and my parents thought that the US, the culture is freer, more democratic, not in a political sense, but just um, things are a lot more relaxed and flexible in American society as opposed to UK. I think there's less strict rules of manner, and so they chose New York for me, and that's why I do not have a British accent, and I lost it in half a year. There was a time when I thought I would go to Europe, but I don't know, somehow US was just easy to be in. Dave, thank you, glad you like my content. When you approach a piece, how much room do you have for interpretation, and does this change over time? So if you were approaching the same piece maybe now and a couple of years ago, would they be different? The second part of your question, yes, it would be different. And yes, it changes over time. How I interpret a piece, depending on how mature I was and how much maturity that particular piece demands, the difference might be smaller or bigger depending on that. For example, I think my Bach is not too different in interpretation. Execution is a different aspect, because when I listen back to my childhood days, I can tell what my intention was, and maybe I just didn't have the experience to execute it fully or the confidence to execute it fully. I'd say my Bach interpretation is not as drastic as Chopin. Yeah. Although, it depends. It's not a style of period also, because I found out that I did play the Scarlatti in E in Canada in 2013 maybe? Yeah. And I actually played twice as fast as I do now. How did that happen? I honestly don't know. I think back then I probably wanted to sound like Horowitz, or I was very influenced by Horowitz. But after many years, I don't even remember why I picked up this Scarlatti out of the blue for the bunch of concerts I did in 2019, but for some reason I did. And then it became the theme song for many people. And somehow I decided this was a lot slower. There was no particular process of thinking that made the change. So again, it's very hard to quantify how much room. It's not like the piece is 100 meters and then the room left for my belongings, meaning my interpretation and my different aspects of playing, takes up 70 meters, therefore I have 30 meters to wiggle around and change things up, Conrad, which composer you will choose first to widen your concert repertoire? I guess you're asking for the future? Like which one I would choose to widen my concert repertoire? Honestly, my repertoire list is quite wide with variety already, because I learned a lot. I guess there isn't a lot of Prokofiev, but I don't have a system and I don't like to restrict myself to a certain composer and learning certain pieces if I'm not drawn to it. I know it's kind of not pretentious, but maybe a bit egotistic to think like that. But I think I did my time in the first 10 years when I was learning so many things. So, I don't know. I don't know. I can play quite a handful of composers. Maybe not so much of the Russians, so maybe I would go into the Russian one day more, but not sure. Samson Lee, he asked the question in Cantonese. I have never heard of this. I don't even know what the difference is. I'm not sure your second half of your question. So because everyone else speaks English, I'm going to translate your question. You're saying that you've heard research about how relative pitch means that people can tell the relation between two pitches, so they're very sensitive to harmonies, whereas absolute pitch people can identify individual notes but don't have the same sensitivity to harmonies, meaning the group of notes. They cannot tell so much about the difference. It seems a bit strange. I guess I have absolute pitch, but I can also tell if something is not in tune between the notes, I think, since I can identify. So you're saying that you have relative pitch, but you cannot identify the individual notes when someone plays a bunch of notes, but I can. So is it possible to have both then? Maybe I'm less annoyed by bad harmonies. I find that a little bit strange to believe it's true. I don't know. Not sure. I don't know whether my question is well timed, but are there some prospects on a horizon for the much desired Schumann album? So on Instagram, I talked about how on my trip here from the US, I sat next to, or I changed seats because the seat that I was assigned to on my flight, it had a broken TV. Also, I didn't want to be in the middle seat directly next to a passenger, so I wanted to distance myself a little bit, and so I chose the aisle seat in the, the 3 seats kind of setup. And after I switched seats, the TV broke, the one that I switched away from, and it just says please wait, and it said please wait for the entire 6-hour flight. And I was making a post about that, saying, is this a sign from the universe of something? Because that sums up my anxiety for the past year. About this year, I think. Yeah. Just because everything is on hold. My album is on hold. I was supposed to record it in the hypothetical ideal world. I was supposed to record it on my Europe trip. And I was supposed to produce the master by June, July. Clearly, it's not happening. And there are some things going on in the background, so things can change and pick up. But as of today, June 13th, I still have absolutely no idea when it's gonna happen. There are people who know that I want this to happen, and I made it very, very clear where my stance is and what my values are. So, there's a puppy on the roof. Hello, puppy. So, I will keep you updated, but I also completely understand why people leave my Patreon, because there's nothing to see, but the reality is that there's nothing moving. And I'm also developing something related to Together with Classical, and that is also kind of on hold. Maybe things will pick up in the next 2 weeks, but it's a waiting game and not in my control. So basically, in the meantime, I'm just trying to do the best I can and do as much as I can for my audience and make it something. Well, depends if it works. I will tell you when I'm ready to tell, maybe next week, what I'm trying to start up. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff that I cannot control so much. So you will definitely know when I have something to tell. Jeff Cox. You watched a film about Martha Argerich yesterday, made some 10 years ago by her daughter, Stephanie, in it Martha speak of her deep feeling for Schumann's music. Wonder if you knew that. I didn't know from watching the documentary because I did not see it, but I would not be surprised just because I heard her play a lot of Schumann growing up. There is a live album of her playing Schumann Fantasy-Stücke and Ravel Gaspard de la Nuit, and I had that CD on my phone for many years growing up, and I liked listening, and it's because I listened to that album a lot that I heard of Fantasy-Stücke, so not surprised. Tara. Thank you for your good wishes. You're not sure if this goes over the line as far as being too personal, but do you have a certain food group? For example, meats, vegetables, fruits, sweets, etc. A particular food item that you like to refrain from before you perform to keep you calm? I find myself avoiding heavy meals or eat anything a few hours before performance because my body's already full of nerves no matter how many people are in the room. I like to treat performance and non-performance day pretty much the same, and this was something I picked up from 2019 summer when I was in and out of the stage and the backstage, and just in and out a lot of doors that just opened up and ta-da, you're in front of 1,000 people, and then enter a different door and ta-da, you're back in the toilet. You know, it's just like there's no clear line. I was just walking in and out of different doors all the time, so it became so natural. It felt really natural to just walk on stage as if I was walking backstage or out in the streets. So I don't really like to refrain myself and say you cannot do this because you're about to perform, because that just psychs yourself or psychs myself out more than it needs to, because at the end of the day it's part of your life to be, or my life to be, suddenly on the stage and then not on the stage and then back in bed. You know, it's just part of life, and I find it very strange to set a clear boundary if I don't feel well, then maybe I don't eat much, but I try to not be hungry before I perform, otherwise I would not have the energy to play an entire program. So there really isn't any restriction. If I'm tired, I drink a lot of coffee. I did that in Germany in 2019 when I had 2 back-to-back recitals, and I had to also travel to a different city, and so it was a bit exhausting. The answer is no, I guess. But to each its own. I've met other musicians who can only do certain things. I used to do that when I was younger. Then I realized that I am just psyching myself more than I needed to. For example, I would shut off my phone and not look at social media before performing because I thought it was too distracting. But then I changed that habit because I thought there's literally no difference between me walking on stage and seeing the people and me seeing them on my phone before that, so I don't know why that was necessary. I mean, I wouldn't be scrolling the few minutes right before a concert, but I stopped that habit. Takashi, when you practice a concerto, do you use recorded or orchestra track? Do you also use a piano reduction instead of orchestra track? If so, do you play and record a piano reduction by yourself? No, I don't. I actually recently heard about an app where you can play along a piano reduction. I forgot the name of it, but apparently there's this app. I just listened to a normal recording with the soloist, and I try to listen to a variety. This is the same with chamber music. I try to play with all kinds of recordings that have very different tempos and interpretation, just so I'm prepared for the orchestra or the ensemble that I'm going to be playing with. For example, Leon Fleischer is very known for his Brahms concerto recording, but I did not realize how fast he plays the first piano concerto until I listened to Bernstein with Zimmerman, and it is so much slower. And then I also listened to Ketchen, who is somewhere in between, but very angsty. And so just, I like to follow different interpretations so I'm not shocked, because when I got used to Bernstein's Zimmerman's recording, I was a bit shocked when I went back to Fleischer's recording to play along with. So I don't know what the orchestra will be like in 2 days. I will find out less than 48 hours from now. I don't play with the piano reduction. I like to listen to the recording of the concerto so much that I can hear the orchestral parts in my head when I'm not playing with a recording. So if I'm practicing and running through by myself, I know when the entrances come in and stuff like that. And I also like to play with the score, the full score, with the orchestra parts, so I can understand it a little bit better, the relationship between the communications. Because it's a bit like, I had this analogy today when I was practicing, that I've reached that point where I don't want to talk to myself anymore. Also, it's a bit like actors who practice their lines, but they don't practice with the other actors in the movie. And so it's not the same full understanding experience as you would get when you are with the full cast. So it's a bit strange to play with piano reductions. That's really, I don't find it very useful. I mean, I also never practiced with piano reduction, to be honest. Whenever I did that in school, it was for competition or something, like an audition, but never really for study purposes that I played with the piano reduction. Kate, in your opinion, what advantages does the piano have over other instruments? Or do you think you could have played a different instrument, or was it ever going to be the piano? I think the advantages of the piano is that you get everything in terms of pitch. And that's why sometimes you can understand a larger ensemble a little bit easier because you are used to having multiple voices within one instrument. I honestly cannot imagine how it's like for violinists and string players and, well, pretty much any orchestral instrument, how they can practice without everything in front of them. Like for chamber music, I never quite understood why the piano needs to have the entire score with other people's parts, but then it's individual parts for the violins and cellos and in chamber music. It's so strange. I can't imagine practicing a chamber piece looking at just my piano part. It's like, imagine an orchestral score without the piano reduction. I've seen that. They exist. It's so strange. It's too strange. It's just like reading a script with only one character. You don't know what the other characters are saying. And it's so strange to me. And I don't know if I really seriously considered anything other than a piano, because the one experience I had an itch to play violin, but yeah, I don't know, I think piano, I have a lot more control over a lot of things also, not only the variety that I have in front of me, but I can control things a lot more and a little bit more predictable. So maybe I like some form of stability in playing a piano, because if you play other instruments, you have to constantly change according to who is accompanying you or the other ensemble players or orchestral players. And it's not so common to have solo stuff. I mean, there are some, but it's not the majority. So, Jeffrey Jones. My question is when confronted with the question between tempo, speed, and following the composer's instruction for artistry, which should be the initial focus? Composers. I'm working on a piece with a lot of pianissimo. When I play the pianissimo correctly, I'm way off the total time that others are able to play in correct tempo and artistry. Any thoughts on how I should deal with this? I'm confused. Why would playing stuff softer make you play slower? Also, your questions about tempo, so I don't know what PPP has to do with the dynamic. So I am not so sure. And there's no such thing as a total time of a piece of music. And so I would say composers is always the first point of reference. And there are times when you would need to override it because of certain historical context. For example, Clara Schumann is known, and also Robert Schumann wrote this explicitly in his letters to her, that she always plays things a lot faster than they need to be, or that she has this habit of playing his works faster, or something like that. I remember this being mentioned in one of his letters to her. And so it's not a surprise that her tempo markings, her beats per minute markings for Robert's compositions are a tad faster than they sound right. So sometimes it's just intuition, but I would try to stick to composer because I hesitate to put too much so-called artistry. It's like having too much salt and pepper and then it just becomes MSG rather than the original food. On that note, I'm going to stop talking. And this I talked, I guess, a little bit longer per question, but thank you for listening, and I'm so glad to finally do one of these in a different setup, even though it's not anything special. I think for privacy reasons, I don't want people to know which hotel I'm in, otherwise I would show you the view, but you will see this in a few weeks when I make the vlog. For now, I don't have anything in particular to say. If you have any particular requests for things you'd like to see exclusively on Patreon while I am dangling in Europe, let me know. I am open to doing something new, just because I understand there is really not much to show you, and that can be frustrating, especially since you're spending your hard-earned money on me. I feel like you should get something in return. Not saying that everyone is like that, but I also understand that it's a very valid reason for those who think like this. But keep in mind that I don't have a constant access to pianos, so if it's anything that isn't gonna require piano, I can do that for you this month. Train. Well, I mean, you know I'm somewhere near the station because I hear the train all the time. But, okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your support. Stay healthy and enjoy your summer. Well, I assume most of you are having summertime unless there are any Australians here. Birds are so nice. Alright, I'm gonna enjoy my night. Bye!